Hey, after Dad passes away, is it okay if I move back home? My SIL calmly made this unexpected statement. She had indeed moved back home after her third divorce. She was a troublesome returnee daughter who neither paid for any living expenses nor did any housework. If this situation continues, our position as a couple will be jeopardized. We must take measures. That's when an idea came to me. I, Mina, am 38 years old, running a pastry shop with my husband in a provincial city. The shop has been loved by locals for 40 years and was managed by my father-in-law. We got married when my husband, Duke, was 30 and I was 28. Being a regular at the pastry shop, I was liked by both my husband and my father-in-law. Duke's sister, Betty, moved back home after 2 divorces, but left 2 years ago when she got married for the third time. Her father had strongly opposed this marriage, as it was a scandalous affair that was frowned upon socially. You stole someone else's husband, so you must stay with him for life. Even if you come back, I won't welcome you home. Though he forgave her, he made it clear that she must take responsibility, and Betty never returned home again. Then, my father-in-law was discovered to be suffering from pancreatic cancer. The disease was quite advanced, and the doctors said he did not have long to live. Understanding the situation, he called his son and his daughter, along with me, his daughter-in-law, to his hospital room. Duke, I'm leaving the shop to you. You can run it as you wish. Work together with Nina and make it work. My husband nodded repeatedly and, holding his father's hand, replied, "Don't worry, leave it to me. Betty, it's been a long time. I'm sorry for what I said last time. It was almost like disowning you. If you're happy, that's all that matters. Stop by the house sometimes." It seemed that he was still fond of his daughter. She replied with teary eyes, "Understood, Dad." However, as soon as she left the hospital room, she calmly said, "Hey, after Dad passes away, is it okay if I move back home?" What? My husband, Duke, and I were shocked, and we couldn't immediately understand the meaning of her words. Actually, I broke up with him last month. He was having an affair with a woman 10 years younger than him, and I was so angry I got back at him. It was all his fault, but he made such a fuss about it. I couldn't take it anymore. That's how she reported her third divorce. It's hard to pay the rent for my current apartment by myself, so this came at a good time. She seemed to think it was appropriate to move back home now that her father wouldn't be around much longer. I couldn't believe it. Let me know when the time comes. Leaving those words behind, she left the hospital. We were in a daze, unable to find words to respond, and just stood blankly in the hospital corridor for a while. Betty had first married at 25, and she had already left home when I got married into the family. But she returned after divorcing 2 years later. She remarried at 30, but her mother suddenly died of a stroke. And during those difficult times, she quickly filed for marriage and left again. 3 years later, she divorced again. Her third marriage, which started with an affair, ended in just a year. Altogether, her marriages didn't even last 5 years, and honestly, I can't understand her way of thinking. She was a type I had never encountered before, and we could never get along. I hate to say this, but I just can't bring myself to like your sister. When I conveyed this, Duke sighed along, indeed. She's my sister, but I can't bring myself to like her either. She's been self-centered since childhood, and as an adult, she hasn't changed. She grabs whatever she wants by any means necessary and discards it as soon as she's bored. She lacks compassion. Just imagining living together with her again made my spirits sink. My father-in-law passed away 10 days later. He was a beloved local shop owner and a friendly figure who also served as a community leader. So many people attended his funeral. Naturally, Betty was there too, but she didn't help with anything, eating the food as if she were a stranger. The pastry shop established by my father-in-law focused on traditional cakes with a local twist, delicious but not very popular among younger crowds. My husband, Duke, graduated from a school specialized in pastry and often clashed with his father about wanting to utilize his training in France to develop new products aimed at younger customers. Looking back, though, those were fun times. In our area, a car is essential, and the parking lot at the shop was extensive. Duke's idea was to use a corner of it for an expansion of the shop and to set up an eat-in area. The second floor of the shop served as living space for us, Duke's parents, and occasionally Betty, who returned now and then. On the first anniversary of my father-in-law's passing, only close family gathered on the second floor of the shop. Even on that day, Betty didn't help out and was cheerfully chatting with uncles and cousins. Aunts and cousins who knew her well said her reputation was very low. Regardless of whether they are relatives or not, she's very friendly to men, everyone agreed. The thought of living with her was daunting, but we hadn't told the relatives about her third divorce or her plans to move back home yet. Nothing was decided, and we wanted to avoid any issues at the first anniversary. However, living together with her started sooner than expected. Betty came for the first anniversary and immediately settled in the family home. The room our parents used is empty, right? I'll be using that one. The moving truck is coming tomorrow, so help me out, she declared. I had never been so surprised. It seemed she had planned to live with us from the start, intending to take over their parents' spacious room instead of her old, smaller one. Although Duke expressed his dissatisfaction, the volume of belongings that arrived the next day wouldn't fit in the small room, and we had no choice but to move them into the larger one. From that day on, she lived a carefree life. She slept until the afternoon, freely took food from the fridge to have lunch, spent the afternoon in her room using her smartphone or watching TV, occasionally went shopping, and bought cosmetics and clothes. Cooking for 2 or 3 doesn't change the effort required. Please prepare my portion too, she said, naturally expecting me to prepare dinner. Duke and I endured the first week, but feeling the need to change the situation, Duke was the first to bring it up. Betty, aren't you going to work? Helping out in our shop would be fine, but if you're going to live here, you need to contribute something. If you don't want to work, do the household chores. She laughed loudly and replied, No way. I want to be exempt from living expenses and household chores. Duke, you received a lot of inheritance, right? The shop is yours, so you should at least cover my living expenses. Her brazenness had its limits. I was beginning to feel that no words would have any effect on her. Duke could only sigh and respond with a resigned, okay. Then one day, Duke came to me somewhat excited. Nina, I got a call from that bar. They're reopening today. Moonlight, it's been over a month, hasn't it? Shall we go tomorrow? Moonlight is a speakeasy-style bar located just a 5-minute walk from our house. It's more of a literal hideaway than just speakeasy style. A small gate features a modestly affixed sign with Moonlight engraved on a 2-inch square metal plate, making it look like just an ordinary house at first glance. The bar has only 7 counter seats, with dim lighting, and while it doesn't offer proper meals, it serves a variety of delicious alcohols, prosciutto, and cheeses. The owner is a man whose age is hard to guess, likely between 25 and 35 years old. He wears slightly tinted round glasses, sports a beard, and has slicked back hair fixed with hair gel, all of which contribute to his humorous and unique ambience. Previously, the bar was managed by an elderly gentleman over 70 with no relatives. But after his death, the current owner took over the management under the condition of handling the transition. This transition occurred about 5 years ago. New customers rarely notice this bar, and it's not a place people just stumble upon, but those in the know keep it bustling with a few regulars during open hours. However, the owner is whimsical. There are no fixed off days or business hours, and he often takes sudden, long vacations, closing the shop for extended periods. When closing for a long time or reopening, notifications are sent via email at the request of regular customers. So, we decided to visit Moonlight for a drink immediately. Hey, long time no see. Where have you been? I was in Bolivia for a bit. South America, right? Yes, it's a country surrounded by the Andes and famous for the Unisalt Flats. After a brief chat about Bolivia, the owner asked, Have you both been well? It seems like you might be a bit stressed. With no other customers around, we inadvertently vented about Betty. That sounds tough. The owner was a good listener and seemed genuinely interested. As the conversation wound down, Duke sighed and said, I guess the only solution is for her to find a new boyfriend and move out. Huh? But Betty hardly ever goes out, and she's already 35. It's hard to imagine her finding a boyfriend. Even though it felt harsh, I couldn't help but say it out loud. If Nina says that, it must be serious. I might have an idea. As the owner spoke, we leaned in eagerly. What? Do you have a good idea? As the conversation continued, we discussed a proposal from the owner. It seemed Duke was seriously considering taking action against his sister. If Duke agrees, I have no objections. Just as planned, on the next day off for the pastry shop. In the afternoon, the owner visited our home. When we opened the front door, we couldn't believe he was the same person we knew. His previous slicked back hair had changed to a more natural flowing hairstyle. Without glasses and having shaved his beard, he looked quite handsome. I was much younger when I took over the bar, so I was a bit disguised. The owner explained. His tinted glasses turned out to have no prescription. But it's becoming a hassle, and I thought I might stop using the disguise with this opportunity. It's perfect timing. Saying that, he laughed brightly. I thought he was clearly an eccentric character. However, I felt certain that Betty would definitely show interest in him. Yet, despite it being past noon, she still hadn't gotten up. As soon as the owner graciously greeted us with "Thank you for having me today," she appeared. Oh, do we have a guest? Excuse me for looking like this. She was in very revealing house clothes, arching her back and pushing her chest forward. I really disliked her behavior like this. As I told you yesterday, we have a guest coming over for lunch today. What? Really? She hadn't been listening to my words at all. May I join you? She asked the owner in a coquettish manner, which annoyed me. But this was all part of today's plan. She went back to her room, changed her clothes, and came back after meticulously doing her makeup. She still wore a top with a deep neckline, emphasizing her cleavage. I run a bar nearby, but I was overseas for about a month, so I've been missing American home cooking. I heard that Nina was preparing a meal, so I'm sorry for imposing. The owner introduced himself with the clean and youthful demeanor of a young man. I had no idea there was such a bar around here, she expressed surprise, but we had kept it a secret, wanting to protect our couple's hideaway. He requested roast beef, cream stew, and potato salad. I've been craving these. These are truly wonderful. He said this and joyfully ate my cooking. Is this okay? If you have any requests, I can cook anytime. As she said this, I thought it might have been bad to serve such a simple meal, but Duke and I nodded to each other, happy that the first stage of our plan had been successful. From that night on, Betty started frequenting Moonlight regularly. Today, I'm going to the movies with the owner, she'd say cheerily as she headed out. I was worried that the owner might find her bothersome, but he seemed to be enjoying himself. Indeed, he was a bit of an eccentric character. 2 weeks later, we received an email from the owner saying, I'm going to implement the final phase now. We hurried out of the house and headed to Moonlight. When we entered the bar, there was a man sitting deep behind the counter. He was a gentle person whom we had spoken to several times at this place, and he was nearly 6'5" tall. It was Mr. Rogers, who runs a small construction company. Betty sat down, leaving 2 empty seats between us, and the moment she saw us, she clearly looked annoyed. Probably, Mr. Rogers sitting further down was also an unwelcome presence for her. Hey, when is our next date? She asked cheerfully across the counter. A date? Did I make such a promise? The owner replied deliberately while placing a drink on a coaster. Oh, you're terrible, she cooed, almost unbelievably sweet. I just accompanied you because I didn't want to go to the movie alone. I wanted to see that film too, he responded expressionlessly. Betty was clearly shocked by his response. That's cruel. We're dating, aren't we? She exclaimed, typical of her. She often seemed to think that everyone adored her. That's troubling. You thought that? You remind me of my mother, so I kind of went along with it out of a sense of gratitude toward her. Something like that? The owner replied. Duke and I had a hard time holding back our laughter. Come on, that's not possible. How old do you think I am? It's impossible for me to have such a grown-up son. After taking this significant blow, the owner delivered another strike. However, you are over 50, right? Since I'm 28, a parent-child relationship seems more natural than that of lovers. The owner was clearly jesting, fully aware of her real age, which we had communicated to him. I'm only 35 years old. Why would you think I could be your mother? She seemed genuinely upset, but then she quickly moved next to Mr. Rogers, asking in a coquettish voice, Do I really look that old? Confirming target change. The owner said quietly. Duke gave a small fist pump and responded with, Understood, while I struggled to contain my laughter. Mr. Rogers earnestly replied to her, No, you look young. I have seen you here a few times and always thought you were beautiful, which pleased her. You seem very reliable. I like men like you. Betty said this and pressed her ample chest against Mr. Rogers' strong arms. Mr. Rogers also replied, I also prefer women like you, as he wrapped his arm around her waist. After a slightly uncomfortable scene unfolded, the two left the bar closely together. Betty did not return home that night. When she returned the next morning, she said, I couldn't sleep all night. I'm so tired. Haha. And shamelessly continued her words before disappearing into her room. Afterwards, she began to spend many nights out. And a month later, she hardly returned home at all. It was safe to say the plan had worked brilliantly. We met with the owner at Moonlight to discuss how things had unfolded. But Mr. Rogers seems like a nice guy, and I kind of feel bad. Are you sure it's okay? I was feeling a bit guilty as if we had pushed her onto Mr. Rogers. No worries. We chose carefully. Mr. Rogers is so passionate that his previous wife ran away, so he should get along well with her. I see. Duke listened to the conversation and smirked wryly. While I was glad Betty had moved out, I was also enviously reflecting on their budding relationship, leaving me with mixed feelings. Sensing this, the owner gently spoke up. Mr. Rogers is truly a wonderful person, but he does have some issues. The owner's words were laden with meaning. One day, Betty, buoyant in her steps, announced, I've really enjoyed the hospitality. As soon as the legal remarriage waiting period is over, I plan to get married right away. So, goodbye. And she started to leave the room. Duke stopped her with a warning. He can be very jealous, you know. He's always had a fierce temper whenever he sees a woman being friendly with another man, far more intense than you'd expect from his size. Even a light touch can turn into a big problem, so be careful. Really? I didn't know that. Her complexion changed instantly. However, as long as you don't cheat on him, he's really kind, so you don't need to worry. I spoke with a calm smile, but the owner had mentioned that Mr. Rogers' possessiveness was quite severe. I couldn't imagine how long she, who loves her freedom, could tolerate such strictness. Still, that was strictly their personal issue to handle. I also have some happy news to share. After years of fertility treatments, I've finally conceived and am now in a stable period. Next spring, I'll be having twins. I revealed it with a mix of irony and excitement. At my comment, her eyes widened in disbelief. Yes, that's right. So even if you come back, there won't be a place for you here anymore. Duke told her calmly, and her expression drastically changed, visibly shaken. You really don't need to worry. Mr. Rogers has promised that he won't let you come back here again. Duke added, trying to reassure her, but there was one important fact we hadn't yet disclosed. It concerned Mr. Rogers' mother. Her potential mother-in-law is known for her strict personality. We kept this fact a secret because revealing it might lead her to reconsider the marriage altogether. However, further conversations with the owner revealed that the relationship between Betty and her mother-in-law was indeed not going well. I don't want to live with my mother-in-law anymore, she complained and added, I want to live just by ourselves. But Mr. Rogers isn't listening to her pleas. But I tried to meet your demands at night, so there should be no problem, he said with a laugh. Hearing this, I felt a chill somewhere deep inside. People are diverse, and so are the dynamics of each couple's relationship. Despite the deep concerns about whether their marriage would truly work out, this resolution promised to finally free us from being troubled by her presence. What lies ahead for us is the new challenge of raising the twins soon to arrive. This challenge will undoubtedly bring many difficulties, but my husband and I are filled with hope for the future. After the birth, I'll need to focus on breastfeeding for a while, so I'll have to avoid alcohol, I mentioned, contemplating the future during a visit to Moonlight. When I spoke regretfully about it, the owner of the bar reassured us. Don't worry, I have a variety of delicious non-alcoholic cocktails prepared, so I look forward to welcoming you here anytime. Also, if there's anything else I can help with, please let me know, he said, and together we raised a toast. Let's give it our all for our children to come, my husband declared with a new resolution. He then began to reveal recipes he had kept secret out of deference to his father, and embarked on developing a new menu. Some of the dishes he created were particularly appealing to the younger crowd, both in taste and appearance, making for stylish and photogenic cakes that did well on social media. They quickly became popular items, drawing long lines of people eager to purchase them. The owner of Moonlight also showed interest in trying out these cakes at his bar and made a special request for a cake infused with enough alcohol to get tipsy from eating it, truly highlighting his unconventional nature. Even if there was a possibility that my sister-in-law might return, my husband and I vowed to firmly refuse her re-entry because we now have a new family to protect and